What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and I hope you're all doing well today. I have done a lot of Mythic Plus in the last 7 or 8 days, and there's a topic that I've wanted to cover for a while, but after looking through all my footage since I recorded most of my runs, I realized how important of a topic it is, so that's why we're doing that for today's video. It's about an ability that is unique to Outlaw's toolkit. It isn't a cooldown, is not really a DPS gain, technically it costs a GCD, and really doesn't do anything on the damage meter, so why is it so important? Well, that's the point of today's video, as this is possibly one of the best things that you can learn how to do as an Outlaw Rogue as you're getting into higher Mythic Plus keys, or just so you can learn how the spec functions a little bit more. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now let's take a look at potentially the strongest crowd control ability in Outlaw's toolkit, Gouge. So this is a pretty specific topic for a video, but it's something that I've always seen as one of Outlaw's greatest strengths in Mythic Plus, so I figured I'd try to explain some of the reasons why Gouge is such a potent member of your toolkit as Outlaw. For those who are new to Outlaw or aren't that familiar with the spec yet, Gouge is a simple, single-target incapacitation effect. This causes a target to stop doing anything for up to 4 seconds, but this effect breaks immediately upon any damage being taken. Gouge costs 25 energy normally, has a 15-second cooldown, generates 1 combo point, and has the unique positional requirement of being in front of your target to use it. On paper, this probably doesn't sound like anything all that impressive, since the incapacitation effect will almost immediately be broken in Mythic Plus due to dots or cleave damage. However, the strength of Gouge is not to be underestimated, as this move can save your group so much time and damage in Mythic Plus keys that it's pretty unreal. Firstly, it has an exceptionally short cooldown for being a crowd control effect, being the same exact cooldown as a regular kick interrupt for rogues. It also gets extra melee range from the virtually mandatory Outlaw talent Acrobatic Strikes, which gives Outlaw its well-known reputation of having noodle arms and being able to hit things while staying safely out of harm's way in a majority of situations. The Dirty Tricks talent also makes Gouge cost no energy, making it all that much easier to use as often as necessary. So the only true negative interaction that Gouge has is your overall damage will potentially be a little bit lower since you'll be using GCDs on a move that does no damage. So why would you want to use this move then? Less overall damage doesn't exactly sound appealing on paper, but the group-wide benefits of effective Gouge usage is so much greater than an extra 100-ish DPS by the end of a dungeon. Now, this isn't a term that I've found an appropriate or correct name for yet, and I'm sure someone will correct me the second I say it, but the way I break down NPC casts in a dungeon is between hard casts and soft casts. And I know that term hard casting is usually used for when a player is manually casting something that you usually have procs for, but I'm talking about how NPCs are programmed to use their abilities and how their abilities can be stopped. A lot of enemies have what I call a hard cast, meaning that unless you use an actual interrupt on the ability, they will attempt to recast the move over and over until it's successful, or after being stopped an absurd number of times by other means. A prime example of that is the Brood Ambusher in Plaguefall. That's the mob that casts the Stealthling spiders that'll jump on someone and eventually turn them into a meat puddle after a few seconds if they aren't knockbacked or feared or something like that. The ambushers will try to cast Stealthlings like 4 times in a row, even if you stun it, gouge it, then blind it, then fear it over and over. Eventually it does give up casting it, but this is a pretty big waste of crowd control, so it's better to just let the Stealthling cast go off if you have some way of AoE incapacitating the tiny spiders. A soft cast, at least the term I use for it, is any ability that you can stop with multiple forms of CC, and doing so causes the enemy to skip the cast. And this is where Gouge makes its big play, because Gouge works on virtually anything that can be CC'd, since it has no requirements of it being a certain type of NPC like a lot of abilities do. There are so many good examples of Gouge being perfect for stopping these soft casts, so to speak, especially since there are a lot of them that technically you can't even use a real interrupt on. Seriously, there are so many abilities and casts you can stop without even having to use your interrupt on them. It's hard for me to remember all of them, but I'll do my best to give you some of the best examples I can think of off the top of my head. It may take some getting used to the timing and planning around the pulls where Gouge is super important, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be contributing far more to your group than you might have thought possible before. The less damage you all take and the less time you waste, the faster you clear dungeons and push your keys. And your tank might not fall over as easily too, which is always a plus. Again, this is by no means an exhaustive list of all the things you can stop with Gouge, but just a bunch of really good ones I've come across over the last couple months of pushing keys and playing. If you know any other ones and want to share your experience and insight, then feel free to mention them in a comment so other folks can get a bit more knowledge on how to make the most out of this ability. A dungeon a lot of people seem to have trouble with is Theater of Pain, and one of the most annoying abilities that you can prevent and will help your team save a ton of time is the Devour Flesh cast that the Putrid Butchers do. This move is a huge hit on your tank, which is already pretty nice to be able to stop for them, since you're preventing them from taking unnecessary damage, but if Devour Flesh hits your tank, or anybody nearby because your tank decided to run away to try and not get hit by it, then the Butcher heals for 3 times however much damage it dealt. If you've ever noticed this one jerk taking forever to die, then it's because this move isn't being stopped every time it comes up. Conveniently, the Butcher will cast Devour Flesh like every 16, 17-ish seconds, which means you can stop this move every single time, making these pulls so much faster to deal with. The Shackled Souls in Theater of Pain are those nasty little things that throw the chains on everyone when you're going through that hallway to Kultharok, so if you happen to see some of these going out and no one has any interrupt left or AoE thingies to stun them with, then you should be using Gouge to either help yourself or a teammate of yours take way less damage by stopping the Bind Souls casts whenever you're able to. These are also interruptible by normal means, but again, the Mighty Gouge gives you an extra way to stop this really hard-hitting ability. Jagged Quarrel is another nasty hitting move you can help prevent with Gouge since it can't be interrupted with a kick, and this move is exclusive to the shambling Arbalest enemies you'll see in Zav the Unfallen's hallways in Theater. The dot from this ability is no joke on higher fortified keys, so try to stop it whenever you're able to. Necrotic Wake is another dungeon with some very dangerous casts that can really ruin your day if they even get off once. The worst of the bunch is Gore Splatter. This is a move used by the Corpse Collector enemies that you'll fight near the end of the dungeon, when you fly up in the Ziggurat above Amarth's encounter zone. This cast is a devastating disease move that hits everyone in a 60-yard radius for a big chunk of plague damage, and then puts a brutal damage over time effect on everyone that ticks every second for 6 seconds. Seriously, never let this cast go off, and now that you know Gouge will stop it, even if your interrupt is on cooldown, it never should. The other really annoying move that can become really deadly on higher keys is Drain Fluids. This move will incapacitate one person for as long as it's being channeled, and it does a ton of damage on high keys. This is used by Corpse Collectors, Corpse Harvesters, and the Stitching Assistant, so you'll see this move throughout the dungeon. Legitimately, this move can probably kill someone within that 4-second channel if you're on like a 20 fortified key, so make sure to gouge the crap out of these enemies to prevent this from happening to you or anyone else in your group. Mists of Tyrna has a few moves that you can prevent from being painful with Gouge as well, with the first one that's really noteworthy being the Drust Harvesters near the beginning of the dungeon. The move you'll want to keep an eye out for is Harvest Essence, as this will do group-wide ticking damage very quickly, and it heals the caster for 100% of the damage that it deals. And it hits pretty hard, so it'll heal him a lot, and because it heals him, it slows down your pull, so be sure to stop this move whenever you're able to. Again, with Gouge being such a short cooldown, you can easily interrupt one cast and gouge the other, since the first big pull in Mists has 2 of these suckers waiting for you. The Mistveil Stalkers are another super important enemy that you'll want to keep an eye on. These are those fox jerks in the maze section of the dungeon, and the Mistveil bite attack they do is exceptionally brutal. Not only does it do a big chunk of damage up front, but it puts a hefty dot on whoever is unlucky enough to get chosen as a snack. It can be a bit tricky positioning yourself in front of the foxes due to how melee unfriendly the maze can be at times, but it will be a massive benefit to your group if the stalkers get off as few bites as possible. And I nearly forgot one of the most important moves that you could possibly stop, at least for your tank. The Depraved Houndmasters in Halls of Atonement. These suckers have 2 pretty painful moves if you aren't careful, and Gouge can stop both of them in their tracks. Rapid Fire is a huge frontal cone attack, spewing arrows out all in front of the Houndmaster in a channeled move like some sort of hellish lawn sprinkler of death. This is a 5-second channeled move and covers a very wide area of effect, and the visuals aren't super flashy or really noticeable, so a lot of people tend to just swim in arrows if the charming and smart rogues of the group don't gouge the casts. Your other target for Gouge is Loyal Beasts. This cast will cause any nearby vicious Gargants to become even more vicious, increasing their damage dealt by 125% for 20 seconds. This often means if your tank isn't moving away from them, they will probably be taking a dirt nap very shortly, which means this rabid bear thing is going to be eating the rest of your group for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe a bit of dessert too with one of those nice little chocolate mints in the foil wrappers. Seriously though, don't let loyal beasts go off. While we do have the ability to shiv and remove enrage effects with numbing poison from the Gargans, the cooldown on that is pretty hefty, and more than likely you'll have more than one Gargan active in any pull where this can happen, so just make sure to gouge the crap out of the Houndmasters whenever you see this coming. Your group will thank you one day. Maybe. Probably not, but you did your job, so that's all that matters. Again, it is huge how many moves can be stopped with Gouge, especially things that you literally can't stop with a regular interrupt. And the fact that Gouge has such a short cooldown, and you can make it literally free with the Dirty Tricks talent, will still technically cost a GCD, but honestly, that little 100 or 200 DPS in overall damage that you're losing in the dungeon, it might not even be that much. Even if you lose a little bit of damage, the amount of time you're going to save on so many big trash pulls, or your healer's not going to run out of mana as easily, or your tank's not going to run out of defensives and fall over as easily, it all adds up to making your dungeon so much faster and so much less painful to deal with. Believe me, your group will really appreciate it if you can get the hang of using Gouge as well as you should be. So hopefully this information proves useful to you. If you enjoyed the video then, please consider leaving a like or a comment, as it's greatly appreciated and helps show support for the channel, as well as helps the YouTube algorithm do its magic and show more people the channel, as that's immensely appreciated. And speaking of appreciation, I just wanted to extend my appreciation and gratitude to all of my viewers, and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.